Please hold on with applause, I appreciate it. So next question is for Ms. Heinrich. I'm confused by some of the terminology, Allison. Can you compare traditional vouchers with tax credit scholarships, education savings account, and virtual or special education grants?
Sure, I mean, and just not to be flippant, but of course you're confused by the terminology. Anyone with me, they're constantly branding these voucher scams to make them sound more palatable, right? Even though we know, again, these scams will defund our schools and lead to worse educational outcomes. So your traditional voucher has generally been in the form of a grant program, and these grants would be for parents to access and send their kids to private schools. And how, the details of that will be up to the states, as you would. The voucher proposal and the voucher that we've seen from the Senate so far is what's called an educational savings account, which sounds great, right? An educational savings account, we have health savings accounts. It's a terminology that can be analogous to something folks are already familiar with. But the devil's in the details, and I will come back to that because I want to talk a bit more about what this ESA proposal looks like, but we'll still go over the other types of vouchers you typically see before I do that. The other similar type of voucher you see is called it's usually a tax credit. This is usually a tax credit for individuals or for corporations where they get a break on their taxes for helping fund scholarships to private schools. And then finally, you often see a different type of grant program that's usually more narrow in its scope, usually focused on special education, focused on students with disabilities, sometimes a very niche online program to try and address purported holes in the education system. And that's still another type of grant program, which is much more narrow in its scope and not universal. When it comes to the educational savings accounts, to the ESA voucher scheme proposed by the Senate, there's a few things that really stood out to me when I was looking at the legislation. I mean, this is going to add 42 additional full-time employees to the state. That number will likely continue to grow over time. We're going to see vendors being used to administer these accounts, and you should note that these vendors are not limited to nonprofit entities. These can be for-profit vendors profiting off these ESAs and the administration of these ESAs. In terms of the cost, it was noted, millions to $1 billion. If you look further in the fiscal note, were this voucher scheme to pass, and this is generally speaking a conservative estimate from the budget board, in my opinion, given the lieutenant governor's influence on that board as it stands, you're looking at $6 billion before the end of the decade, right? So we're going from 200 million, billion, $6 billion. That is a rapid ballooning of anticipated costs, and that was likely only going to go up. And the other sort of thing is, when you talk about these ESAs, they're not only just tuition. There was an amendment on the floor of the Senate to allow certain amounts of those funds to be spent on computers and technology and otherwise, which could be a legitimate expense, could be, hey, I want a new computer game on, right? Like, there's no controls, there's no accountability, there's no reporting back. So you're really just, hoping and thoughts and prayers in it, right? Which is not a way to, when you're spending money, especially in Texas at least, that I was sort of, generally been okay with. So that's a novel approach, if you will. I think, the other thing to touch on with these ESAs is, yes, there's a lottery system. 80% of these slots are reserved for families that are low income or might have special education needs, etc. However, the problem is with how they defined it, right? The definition used in this legislation is 500% of the federal poverty level. If you have ever interacted with the state agency, maybe to get a chip or Medicaid for a child or for your family, to get SNAP services, otherwise, you will find there is nowhere in the state where that is a permissible income level to receive any services, right? So for context, we're talking about a family of four. It's about $165,000. The median income for a family of four in Texas is about $80,000. So it is double the median income of a family of four. If you were a single parent with a single child who wanted to send to private school, it'd be about $105,000 would be your cap if you're at 500% of the federal poverty level. Whereas that same parent, if they needed health care for their child, their income cap would be $24,000 for children's Medicaid and $36,000 for CHIP, or the Children's Health Insurance Plan, right? So something in that math is not happening right. I'm not a math major. I have my degrees in liberal arts, but even I know that it's not, that math ain't working, right? And all of this will lead to a sort of inflated demand, right? There's not enough funding, not going to be enough spots. The LBB estimates over half of already enrolled private school students are expected to apply for these grants, in addition to anyone else, right? So we're going to have a sort of cyclical effect where their budget, the legislature should this pass would say, here's the money we appropriated, it's only continuing to go up and up, because there's more demand, because we've created this artificial demand in this voucher scam, which at the same time, again, regardless of what type of voucher you have, will lead to continuing underfunding of our schools. It will lead to bigger class sizes, teachers and other support staff being laid off, less educational offerings for our students, and none of that's something that any of us should want for our communities. It really will be, the devastation may not be immediate, it will continue over time, but it will certainly happen. So regardless, again, of what type of voucher scheme you have, and there are many of them, we'll still see all those negative effects.
Thank you, Allison, appreciate it. The next question is for Dr. Pattaville again. So Dr. Pattaville, I read a recent study that indicates there are two main factors driving school segregation. One of them is, and segregation is increasing in our schools. First is the end of most court oversight requiring integrated public schools, but second are policies that favor school vouchers and parental preference. So do you think that voucher programs in Texas, no matter what they're called, will contribute to segregation?
I have a very simple response to this. We have to ask ourselves the question of who gets to participate. Who has access to parents that can transport them, since public transportation via school buses will likely not be available. Part of the voucher bill, if you read it as it's posted, is special education services do not need to be offered by these private schools. So the question is, who gets to take advantage? And then what does that look like in our schools over time? And the thing about public schools is public schools represent America. It's everybody. And we turn away nobody. And we have, I think a retired counselor once taught me that in public schools we have to have thick skins and a short memory, meaning when children, we believe in a child's potential and who they can become more than whatever behavior or whatever's going on with them in the present moment. So we continue to work with our children and help shape them into the young men and women they are meant to be. We accept everybody. And is that true of other organizations that get to take advantage of this voucher?
Thank you, Dr. Pattaville, and I'm coming back to you again. Following on to that, and the previous question you answered, how do school vouchers affect students with special what needs in English and special language?
Yeah, I don't want to belabor the point, but I think I just answered it in my last response.
Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, and so moving on to question 6 for Mr. Norris. Would a voucher cover the full cost of private school tuition? How would families make up the gap, especially those with limited resources?
Well, the answer is it depends. It depends on the family's economic situation, what they can afford, and it depends on the tuition that a private school is going to charge and how much that family wants their kid to go to that private school. So if the kid really has kind of special needs or wants to go to a different school, maybe because all their friends are there, and the family says, okay, well, let's go see if we can find a private school that we can use this voucher with. Well, in some cases, it might come close. In some cases, there's probably going to be a pretty big gap. And then the next question is, well, how do you fill that gap? And the answer is, a lot of times we just can't. So your kid's not going to go. In other cases, families might try to scrimp and save, work a second job. There are families who do that. But no matter what happens, it's a hardship. And I don't see how a lot of families are going to be able to make that work if the tuition that they absolutely want is so high. And think about the fact that there's not like an even distribution of private schools throughout the 254 counties in the state. No. Y'all been to West Texas, right? You've driven through on I-10 and the other west. Did you see a whole lot of private schools? No, I don't think you did. Now, might be a lot in Austin, Dallas-Fort Worth, Houston, these are metropolitan areas, but you know, whether or not those particular places are gonna be the, you know, have the magic sauce that you really like your, kid to benefit from is an open question. So I guess the short answer is, maybe not.
Can I add a couple of things?
Yeah, please do.
So I just wanted to say that these private schools, again, they have the choice whether to take you, and you can be kicked out of a private school for very little reasons, right? Including bad parental behavior. So, and that's devastating, right? If a kid doesn't get their field trip form signed on time, they could be kicked out of school. Like, there are very, very low limits for keeping a kid in a school, and when they get kicked out, and very many of them do, because to Robert's point, it's a hardship. Not all parents can continue the effort it takes to get their kid there, or to, you know, manage the financial struggle. Those kids are at a huge deficit already from moving to a new school and being in a new environment and being with a new curriculum that may or may not match the curriculum that they were exposed to before. And that can have really devastating impacts, just taking the voucher. But then losing the voucher is very hard to make up for. I mean, we're seeing kids who take the vouchers who are seeing the equivalent of Katrina losses, learning losses. When they then lose the voucher, that doubles that. And that's traumatic for them, it's traumatic for the families. This is, to their point, this is a chance that you're taking with your kid, and if your kid is in such a vulnerable place that you really feel like they need to be taken out of their public school to have their needs met, they're being exploited by this system. Those are our most vulnerable kids, and those are the people that we need to be circling around with community, not giving them a little bit of money and sending them off to figure this out on their own. I also want to make the point that as a mother of a kid with dyslexia, I would be responsible, if I took this voucher, I would be responsible for my kid's assessment. Do you know how much it costs to assess a child for special needs? I would be responsible for that. Let's say it's $4,000. I would be responsible for that. I would be responsible for taking that to the school. There's no guarantee, there's no federal protections once I take that assessment to the school, that the school would do anything about it. In fact, they may look at that assessment that I just spent $4,000 on and most likely say we cannot meet these needs. So the impact is devastating. We talk about financial impact, we talk about emotional impact. What we're doing to our most vulnerable populations, what these state leaders are doing to our most vulnerable populations is unacceptable. We should not be accepting this. We need to reject all of this, and we need to show up in force and let them know we care about our kids and we want them in our communities. We don't want them shipped off. We want to take care of them. We want them in our fold, right? And so we can do that. We have the power. It does feel like this is a battle, an overwhelming battle that we're not going to win, and we are going to win. You know why? Because we are on the right side of history, and we are on the right side of history. We need to stand up against this. It feels so heavy, y'all, and being in the trenches, it is heavy, but it is not okay. And when we talk about the impact of this, it goes way beyond anything we can even really explain in a panel forum like this. But I encourage you to think about what that means when we've got a government who thinks that the best course of action to take care of our kids is to separate us and divide us and send us into the wilderness to make our own way. Not okay.
Thank you, Daphne and Robert. Very good, very good. So this next question is really for three folks, and so it's three-part, and we'll wait for them, the panelists, to receive hear all the questions before they begin. So the first will be for Representative Goodwin. Are vouchers risky for state budgets? So Ms. Heinrich, how about rural Texas? You're about, you and Representative Bruce are about as close as anybody here to rural Texas. And Ms. Hofbacker, how about students and families? So Vicki, can you start? Are vouchers risky for the state budget?
Well, of course, vouchers would be risky for a state budget, and you can look at Arizona and what happened there. They started with a narrowly focused voucher program about a decade ago, and that opened the door. And it grew, and they made it unlimited a year or two ago, and so now what we hear is that it's exploded their budget. It has caused them to not be able to do some of the water infrastructure projects that they needed to do. Texas is facing the same thing. We had a demographer the other day say that Texas is still growing by 1,600 people per day. That's people moving in, more births than deaths. And so as the state continues to grow, we have a lot of needs, a lot of infrastructure needs, and water in particular. And so if we're spending money on private schools, that's going to impact other parts of our budget. So yes, I definitely believe that vouchers are very risky for the state budget.
Thank you, Allison.
Okay, there we go, sorry, it's just not hot, my bad. All right, so, you know, when it comes to rural Texas, which, if that seems far away to you, I would suggest to you there are parts of this, of Williamson County and Travis County that could be considered arguably rural, right? Where our public schools are often one of the largest, if not the largest employers. They are the lifeblood of the community. And in many of our rural areas of the state, these counties don't have doctor's offices, let alone private schools, right? You can't get access to a primary care physician, let alone a specialist, and there's certainly not private schools available. So while these school districts in rural Texas, which again have not had a significant funding increase from the state since 2019, have never been funded in a way that keeps up with inflation, are seeing federal funding sources jeopardized, right? So be continuously underfunded, are going to have less funding to subsidize parts of the state where there are private schools. If you were to look at a map, even of the greater Austin metropolitan area, I would suggest to you that the placement of private schools heavily corresponds by income bracket, right? So there's not even equal access within a major urban area. You can especially see this actually if you look at the city of Houston, where literally 45 private schools, no private schools, right? It's very stark if you look at a visualization of this. So, you know, for our rural communities, they face an even bigger threat. They face the underfunding of their major employer, of the foundation of their community, or what's going to happen is you're going to see pop-ups of private school chains that conveniently cost exactly whatever the voucher ends up being approved as, that are not going to be accountable to the taxpayer, that will not be having any transparency, that will not, you know, have any allegiance or skin in the game for that community, right? They're new to their profit. And so I think that it's a huge risk for our rural communities. I think it's obviously a risk for everyone, but I think rural communities especially stand to get the short end of the stick here. And I think that's why you have seen historically, especially in the House, a strong bipartisan coalition of Democratic lawmakers and Republican lawmakers, especially rural lawmakers, who voted down the same voucher scam last session in the incessant special sessions we had, right? A lot of those members, as a result of that, were targeted in their primaries, not on vouchers, on border security, on election integrity, on other red meat issues with massive amounts of out-of-state funding flowing in that completely lie and distort. These are not members who are not conservative, right? These are members who, you know, my boss would agree on, you know, 1 times out of 100 on a policy matter. But they're united in their support of our public schools because as representatives of their community, they knew the effect this would have. And so I think that, you know, I take some courage in the fact that Senator Nichols voted against it in the Senate. I think there's still plenty of folks in the House to have a bipartisan coalition against it. Have the numbers dwindled some on paper? Yes. But we'll have to see what the proposal is. And I think that, you know, I think a lot of rural members will feel the affects and feel the pressure from their constituents to vote no.
Thank you. Daphne?
Hey y'all. So I did talk a little bit about the impact on students and families, but I do, one of the phrases that resonates with me is that this is socialism for the wealthy and capitalism for the poor. It's capitalism for the rest of us. And I say that because as a community member, a member of a neighborhood who has a lot of people who are in private schools, the benefit to my demographic is we get a big fat coupon for our private schools, right? Is that who we should be supporting in Texas? I don't think so. I think if we could already afford a private school, that was a choice we made, we live with that choice. I don't think that we should be giving our taxpayer money to people who can afford to make that choice already. And we know from other states that like 80% of the people who take vouchers tend to be people who are already in private schools. And we also know that private schools not only raise their tuition by voucher amounts, but very often you'll see them kind of split it with the parents, right? They'll say, we're getting a $10,000 voucher, so we're gonna raise our tuition fees by $5,000. And therefore we're sort of, sharing that voucher money. You see that in other states, it's not like uncommon. This is, in fact, we have heard about schools in Arizona, private schools, where they have like an event where they bring people in to sign up for the vouchers that they get to help pay for their tuition. The parents didn't even know what they were signing up for the first time this happened. I mean, we have a direct connection with one of these parents who had no idea. They were like, cool, we'll take this $7,000, whatever it was. I think it was $8,000 actually there. And when they reached out to one of my friends and said, hey, we're going on vacation, she's like, what did you get that? What are you talking about? And educated her on vouchers because they're not part of an immediate ecosystem also that's talking about this. And so it is important for us to be talking about the impacts on our schools and our families and I also want to say we have a lot of parents in public education who are also teachers. Teachers tend to put their children in public schools. And the fiduciary note on the voucher bill that just passed in the Senate literally says that this will destabilize our teacher retirement system because we will have fewer public school teachers every year paying into the system that is now supporting our retirees. So when you talk about the impact on students and families and communities, that's a pretty big impact because there's a lot of teacher retirees out there who have already been clamoring to have their rights and their responsibility that the state made to them when they became teachers, that they would support them in their retirement. They have already reneged on that. And it has taken a huge effort from teachers to get some changes very recently to support their retirement. And this bill, literally in the bill that just passed the Senate, would destabilize all of it. And it passed anyway. It passed anyway. And so I'm gonna take a little moment to say, we can fight this because how many people here have been parents before? Raise your hands. We know how to deal with tiny tyrants. Right? This is what we do as parents. We manage chaos. We manage crazy expectations. We manage a kid looking us straight in the eye and lying to us so believably, saying he didn't do it, that we know he did it and we still kind of want to believe him. Right? This is what we're up against with the state of Texas. With these, they're not superheroes. They have no special powers. We do. So show up, represent, make those phone calls, show up in their offices, be relentlessly decent, be relentlessly kind, be relentlessly honest, because those are things that we're not seeing on the other side. And be relentless, because that is what we're seeing on the other side. Okay, I forget what the question was. I'm going to pass it down.
Daphne, Allison, and Vicky. So we're coming back to you, Daphne, because you're so much dang fun. So hearing all this about school choice, parental empowerment, kind of my takeaway is, man, you got a child in public school, you don't got no choice. Is that true?
Absolutely not true. And every single parent in public education knows that. You know why? Because right now I'm being inundated by the choices that my child has, that the different schools around the district are trying to get him to buy into. Inside our district, we have schools who are advertising, trying to get students. The choice is there. Lots of choice. If he's a music guy, I got a music guy, he's got a couple of different places he could go right now and get the musical education and the focus that we want. If he were an engineering guy, there are schools that we could go to right now that he could apply to and probably get accepted to, that he would be able to focus on engineering. This is very different than applying for a private school that, it's a very different thing. It's that private schools have our choice. But there are public schools. Our kid is going to be in a public school. He's going to be supported by the people who care about our community, no matter what choice he makes. And so again, I will tell you, they're exchanging choice for voice. Our voice is in the public school. Our voice is in public education. We lose our voice when we get out of the public school system. And so it is a false choice to say that number one, that we don't have choice, because we do. Number one, that vouchers give us choice because they don't. Number two, that vouchers give us parental empowerment, or am I on number three? My son's like heckling me every day. Okay, C. You know, this is about, I'm gonna go back to this being about community. This is about, I have no problem with private school. You want your kid in private school? Go do it, girl. You go, exercise your parental empowerment. But don't pretend that you will have power in that school to have a voice for your kid. It won't happen. In fact, there are private school teachers and administrators all over the state who are like getting twitchy because they don't want us in their private schools. They do not want me and my voice in their private schools. And so be aware of that. This is a false choice. It is, again, an 8-year-old looking you right in the eye and telling you something you know is not true, but saying it so compellingly that you're sort of wondering if you should believe it. And this is what happens in Texas all day long, a fire hose of hogwash. And we're stepping in it, we're marinating it, we're plowing through it, trying to figure out what's real and what's not. And do you know who knows? The moms. We can see right through this, and we are able to solve complex problems every single day. So, if you want to join a team that's going to fight this, I'm going to say it again, be a mom. Even the PTA dads, honorary moms. Join the PTA. This is where the power is. This is where your voice is. Help us change what's happening in the state for all of our children. All of our children. Not just the ones that the state leaders are focused on right now.
I'll be an honorary.
Thank you. We need y'all. Honorary PTA
All right.
members.
All that fun stuff, now back to hard money questions. Save your money questions for Representative Goodwin here. What limits would exist on spending these voucher funds? And is it even important to make sure that they're not abused? I think it's probably
Yeah, I mean, right now we're looking at SB2, but that's not gonna be the ultimate final bill, right? I imagine there will be a House bill that's gonna be different than what the Senate bill is. So I don't wanna speculate on what limits or final accountability there might be, because, you know, legislating is like sausage making. Things change and there's a lot that gets mixed in. And so things are gonna change. But what I will say is that even the private school association lobbyists said there's not enough spaces currently in our private schools to accommodate all the students that might want to go to private school. So even the private school association is not in favor of a universal, let's let everybody into private school. But what would happen is, once this door is opened, the private schools that exist would bring in more students, they would become full, but guess what? People would see opportunity, dollars. And all of a sudden you might have virtual private schools. All of a sudden, you know, they could serve the rural community, no problem. Except that the rural community doesn't always have great broadband. That could be a problem. But these fly-by-night schools may not care about that kind of thing. They just are interested. When there is a profit motive, you see people trying to take advantage of that profit motive. So, you know, what limits would exist on spending? Right now, the governor and lieutenant governor are all in favor of universal. To me, universal says the sky's the limit. And what would that mean? Let's say every student in Texas wanted to take advantage of this universal system. We have 5.5 million students. That's a lot of money. And right now, you know, the state's share of what the state is spending on public schools is around $4,000 a student. The rest of it is made up by local property taxes. Do you think that the state is gonna say all of a sudden, well, we'll make up that $6,000 difference for every student? No. No, I mean, they're gonna find a way for it to come from local property taxes. And my concern is, because I represent all the districts that pay into Robin Hood or recapture, this is gonna be even worse for these recapture districts. So I propose that should we pass something that sends our public tax dollars to private schools, we wipe out recapture, and the state should bear that burden.
Thank you. Question 10 will be for Ms. Heinrich. What standards of accountability should private schools accepting vouchers be held to in terms of financial, educational, or other benchmarks? These could include Title IX and the IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And what would change for homeschooling?
So, again, public dollars should be put in our private schools. But if we're gonna have these voucher schemes, they should have the same standards. Right now, our local school districts are governed by an elected board of trustees. Their budgets are on the internet, right? Their meetings are open, there's minutes to these meetings, there's, public participation, things like that. They have way too many standardized tests to take, as any educator can tell you. They have to comply with federal regulations, Title IX, which was often thought of as principally for sports. It was landmark legislation requiring equal access and education across the gamut. I.e. the Individual with Disabilities Education Act, but there's all sorts of legislation designed to help ensure equal access to education. And public schools have to serve everyone. Whether it's the kid that might have, be doing great educationally, great behaviorally, or it's the kid that might have a lot of issues. They still have to take that kid in, give them an education, give them the services they need, and help them. And, these private school vouchers, they won't do any of that. They won't have to, stop actually educating our kids and preparing them for a career or to go to college because they take the STAR test and prep for the STAR test. They won't have to do that. They won't have to comply with Title IX. They won't have to comply with IDEA. They won't have to serve every student. It has been noted over and over, it is not school choice and parental empowerment, it's the school's choice. They will take only those students that are, perhaps easiest to educate or make them look best when they're trying to recruit other students. They don't have to help every single family that lives near them. They don't have to provide transportation. So there's, if we're gonna have this scam, absolutely, they should have the same standards. Will they? Absolutely not. We saw any attempt to amend SB2, the ESA bill from the Senate. I'm sure we'll see similar attempts in the House to have some of these requirements. They were all voted down, right? So the intention is very clear. It's underfunding our schools. It's not inherently to ensure that these private schools then have the same accountability, transparency, accessibility to Texas families. It's the school's choice.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Sorry, you guys, I got a lot to say. I will say that, so here's an example of accountability. When the bill was being debated on the Senate floor, there was an amendment that was proposed that would have required schools taking this voucher to ensure that none of the teachers they hired had a history of sexual abuse or drug abuse. If I'm right, it could be a little different, but it was something like that. I mean, it's profound. They wouldn't even hear that amendment. They wouldn't even hear that amendment, y'all. This is the lack of accountability that we are talking about. It's profound. And Representative Goodwin, did I get that wrong?
No.
Y'all, what are we doing? That's insanity. And so these are all talking points that we need to be spreading, like dragons breathing fire. Every single social media channel that you're on, every group that you're in, every person you talk to, please spread this word. Let them know what's going on. Those of us who have this knowledge, we're writhing in pain, and we need you all to help us. We need everybody to understand this because, again, we can't do this alone. It's going to take everybody in Texas. This is a big monster that we have to fight, and we can do it, but we have to do it together.
Thanks, Daphne. Thank you, Allison. So again, Representative Goodwin, there are a lot of questions about the economics of vouchers. We talked about this a little bit, but what if the number of voucher applicants is way higher or way lower than budgeted?
Well, I think once you open the door in universal program again, that it would expand to however many people want it. I mean, how do you say, well, your child can have a voucher, but your child can't? The idea is that anyone that wants one would get one. I don't know that there would be fewer applicants, except for, again, the fact that some parents wouldn't have the ability to transport their child, some parents wouldn't have the ability to make up the difference in cost, some parents may just prefer to have their child go to the public school where there's all the academics, but also all the extracurriculars, where their child's going to be amongst their peers that they've been going to school with so far. So I suppose there's a possibility that there would be fewer applicants than expected. And then we put all this money into these, the vendors, right? So the first year, honestly, if you look at every bill comes along with a fiscal note of what the legislative budget board says, we think this is how much this is gonna cost. So let's say they're working on an assumption that this would pass late in 2025. It would take some time to set up and get those vendors in place. So really 2026 is the first year of cost. 2027 is the first year that it would be $1 billion. But if you look at their estimates, the following year, it's already growing. They're expecting it to be over $1.5 billion, and then I can't even remember the numbers, but it just grows from there. So their expectation is, yes, while it might start off with, we have to get off the ground, we have to get the rules set up, we have to get the vendors in place, they expect it to grow quite a bit after that. And if it doesn't, I think we would all be shocked.
Thank you, appreciate it, Representative Goodman. And so for Mr. Norris, is it a violation of separation of church and state to allow public school funds to be used for tuition at private religious schools? Are legal challenges on these grounds possible or even likely?
So, here's the deal. The Supreme Court has ruled that allowing religious schools to get voucher money is constitutional. Now, I don't agree with that. That doesn't make any sense to me. I don't think it would make any sense to the Founding Fathers. But that's what the Supreme Court has ruled. Now, what's interesting is that there's actually a couple of provisions in the Texas Constitution that relate to this. And I'll just read a couple of them. Article 1, Section 7. No money shall be appropriated or drawn from the Treasury for the benefit of any sect or religious society, theological or religious seminary, nor shall property belonging to the state be appropriated for any such purposes. So, there's one. Second one is even better. The permanent school fund and the available school fund may not be appropriated to or used for the support of any sectarian school. Now, that's one where, again, legal scholars can disagree whether that applies to this situation. And then we answer the second question. Yes, this is going to be full employment for lawyers. That's what this is going to be. And I say more power to them. I've heard from one lawyer who's a pretty famous one, but I probably can't say his name, but has said that, yeah, I'm going to file suit if a voucher bill passes. And so what's going to happen? It's going to get tied up in the courts, as it should be. It's going to delay implementation, as it should. It's going to cost a lot of money. Well, of course. So we're setting ourselves up for some pretty problematic legal situations here. And I don't know if even Ken Paxton can handle this, because he's such a brilliant man. But the answer is, the thing is, it's like there's so many things that are legal or said to be legal that really shouldn't be legal. And here's one more thing, one more thought I'll leave you with. So, let's say that I'm a hyper-Christian conservative, and but I know some people that go to that Unitarian Universalist church. What is wrong with them? And so the deal is there, that person could say, well, wait. Hey, wait a minute. What's going on here? You know, I don't agree with that money going to a Unitarian church. Why should it be going to them? Well, sorry, it's going to. You pass this, and it's going to be a lot of folks disagreeing if they find out. If they actually listen to what's going on, they're going to be finding out that money is going to religious schools that they don't agree with, and they don't want the money going there. Period. Point in the paragraph.
Can I add something very quick?
Go ahead, Jefferson.
So I do think we should be talking about indoctrination, because that's one of the accusations that our teachers are indoctrinating our kids. Please be aware that our teachers are following state guidelines for teaching our children. So if they are indoctrinating our kids, that's coming from the state. They're not though, right? They're following state guidelines. Do you know who is indoctrinating our kids? Religious schools. Indoctrination is narrowing, right, a field of study or an idea so that you're excluding everything else and you're focusing just on this one. In our public schools, we try to expose our kids to everything. We have kids coming from all different directions. And what we do is just accept them where they are. We don't indoctrinate them. We love that. It's very different. And so I'm bringing this up because we're talking about separation of church and state. I think it's very important that we listen to the language that's being used, because there's a lot of projection. If they say that our teachers are indoctrinating our kids, please think about that and say they're wanting to indoctrinate our kids, right? I think there's some clear messaging here, and I think it's very important that we understand their language and we use their language and we use it against them. Because it's ridiculous. Who would believe that public education, our teachers, are indoctrinating our kids, right? They're just letting them be, because there's so many of them, they're so diverse. And in private school, you're unlikely to see that level of diversity. You're unlikely to see that level of acceptance, right? That's indoctrination. And so don't let them use this word. It's not about choice, it's not about indoctrination, it's not about our teachers failing, right? Our teachers are the Band-Aid holding our schools together against this relentless abuse from our state. So I just want to bring this up. The indoctrination is a big deal, and it's a big messaging, and we need to be aware that it's not accurate.
Thank you, Daphne. Thank you, Robert. So that brings us to the end of our program questions. So I suggest that we have a bit of a discussion on any and all the topics we covered, one to all, and then we'll go to our plethora of audience. Go ahead. Who cares to start out discussing? Not Daphne.
Can I usurp my good buddy Daphne here? You know, I was thinking about, like a lot of folks here, I grew up.
Thank you. I grew up in the 60s and 70s. Well, I recall that there was a book called Blaming the Victim by William Ryan. And what he was writing about was primarily, white and upper class folks tend to view poor people as having problems, that they have healthcare issues, that if only they would have healthy habits, they wouldn't have those problems. Wait a minute. What's going on here? Oh, that's right. Maybe there are barriers to health care, and that's the cause of what's happening with poor people. So what you have then is a situation where the victim, poor people, are just, in effect, having the health care that's denied to them, and that's what's going on. The people who are blaming them set up a situation to where now they can cut back funding for health care, because they don't want it to go to unhealthy, poor people who are abusing the system. That's what blaming the victim is. Now, who's the victim here? Public schools. Public schools are the victim here. They're the folks that are, as Daphne eloquently pointed out, they're underfunded. The teachers are teaching under harsh conditions. They have to deal with a horrendous accountability system, labeling school campuses A to F. Right? So, it just boggles the mind. So anyway, you have victimization going on now, and who's going to do the blaming? Well, probably mean-spirited politicians who already are doing the blaming, who are blaming school districts for things that they put on school districts to try to deal with. It's just a clear path of blaming the victim. And I think that's something that needs to be thought of when you're talking about public schools, is the fact that they're simply in a situation where they're trying to do the best they can with the limited resources that the legislature is giving them. The fact that the legislature has underfunded, not just since 2019, but going way, way back. They've been underfunded for a long time. Teachers have been paid a salary that doesn't recognize that the contribution they make and the fact that they are first-class professionals. That's been going on for a long time. Wait a minute, their accountability system, yep, they've been trying to hold them accountable for a long time. Now, you know, in certain circumstances, accountability is a good thing. And I think probably folks in the public school system would say, yeah, you know, accountability is fine. But the way that's being done right now is very damaging to public schools. So there's a victimization going on. Well, what are politicians going to say to that? You know, we have a problem with public schools because they're unsafe. Talking again about mean-spirited politicians. They are rated F all the time. They have teachers that aren't certified. What on earth is going on with public schools? Well, if that's a problem, then we should have a voucher program that allows public school students to, and their families, to opt out of those horrible public schools. It's blaming the victim, folks, and it's something to consider when, you know, think about what's going on with public education.
Okay, y'all. I don't know if you've heard of Noam Chomsky, but he talks about disaster capitalism, and it's this idea that as a state leader, you can use that power to destroy a system, and then as you're destroying it, point out all the problems that are having in it, so that people are then against it. They think this is a bad system. We see this in education. Defund, degrade, get the entire population to think that our teachers aren't doing a good job, that they're somehow doing sex change operations on our, we can't even give them a Tylenol, y'all. We cannot do sex change operations on any child. We don't even want to, believe it or not. We just want our children to be happy and healthy. But so when we talk about this education system, and he's talking about teachers, our average teacher right now is hanging in there 3 years. And right now, I forget the numbers, somebody could tell us the number of uncertified teachers we have in our schools because of that, right? We're rolling through. If you think about this as a battle against public education, our teachers are cannon fodder. We're sending them to the front lines, and every 3 years, we're having to renew them. They're burning out, they're falling off, we're having to create, new troops in there. Every 3 years, that's unsustainable. It's expensive. It's ridiculously, can I say it's dumb? Is that a bad word? Because this strikes me as really, really dumb that we're doing this in our system. You know what changes this? And again, so $6 billion, they say it's too expensive for us to catch up to the funding that they have not given us over the last 20 years. If my kid had not done his homework for the last 4 years, do you think I would just start now and say, okay, you get to start now and do your homework now, and all is forgiven? Because this is what they keep saying. We're gonna give you $10,000 for your teachers. We're gonna give you this. You just didn't give us a chance to do it. But the fact is, they have been neglecting their job for a generation. And now they're gonna say, you give us vouchers and we will catch up. We will give you some money for your schools. But they're not catching up, right? If your kid was behind an entire 10 years of schooling, you wouldn't say, let's start now. You'd say, you gotta go back and do those lessons. You gotta go back and catch up. And there's not even a conversation about that here. There's not even a conversation about that fact that the state of Texas has been cheating our children of money that they could have been investing in them for years. And it adds up. $4,000 a year over the course of my kids' educational experiences. What, 20,000? I'm an English major. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money, right? And so they're acting as if they don't owe us this money, as if they're doing us a favor by funding our schools, and they're not. They're not. They owe us a lot more than they're gonna give us, and we need to hold them accountable for that. Our teachers should not be cannon fodder for this battle against our children's future that's being waged by a few billionaires against 5.5 million Texas children. It's not okay.
Down billion.
Down, well, here's the thing, guys, we can tax every billionaire in this state, 99% of everything that they own that is of value over $1 billion, and we would have the exact same number of billionaires in our state. But we would also have funded schools, and we would also have roads, and we would also have all of the infrastructure, the internet that we need in rural areas. We are cheating our people, our students, our children, our future, by allowing these state leaders to continue behaving the way they are behaving and have been for the last 10, 15 years.
Thank you, Daphne. Allison?
Sure, I think, anytime that the legislature spends money, which again is you, the taxpayers' money that they're spending, it's an expression of values. So the question before us is, what are the values? And as was noted, the state has not paid its fair share for our public schools since the 80s, before I was alive, right? So that literally is an entire generation, or several generations. And our schools currently haven't seen a significant funding increase in 5 years. You couldn't run a business like that, you can't run your family's budget like that. So why are we doing that for our public schools? And, another thing to think about is people tell you who they are and what they won't believe them, right? The governor gave his state, and he didn't once mention school funding. His 3 education-related items were school choice, teacher pay, and career and technical education. Now, the last 2 things are great, but let's not pretend this isn't a crisis the governor created. Our teachers are so underpaid because the governors refuse to use political capital to ensure adequate school funding. The easiest way to make sure our teachers get a raise is to increase funding to basic allotment, which is tied to teacher pay. We haven't done that, right? And the Senate's educational priorities, which we haven't even seen all of yet, so Lord knows what's coming, include school choice, putting the 10 Commandments in our schools, more book bans, because apparently we didn't ban enough books last time, and teaching our children about the horrors of communism because it's 1984 all over again, right? So, we haven't seen yet him speak what his priorities when it comes to education, but here's the deal. None of those have been school funding. None of them have been raised basic allotment. None of them have been switched to an enrollment-based model over attendance, because just because your kid is out one day doesn't mean you don't have to pay your teachers, your janitors, your counselors, your bus drivers, etc. You don't get to not tell the city, hey, we're not going to pay our electric bill because we had a kid out today. And so I think we need to drastically increase school funding. That should be the only proposal on the table. And anything short of that is a drastic disservice to the people of Texas. And no matter what you want to call it, no matter how you want to dress it up, no matter what poll-tested language you want to use, that remains the case. And I think lastly, the governor said he has the votes. Well, if he had the votes, we would be continuing to dump campaign funds and getting other out-of-state groups to dump advertising funds, including a full-page ad in today's Statesman in favor of school choice or parental time, or however you want to rebrand that. So the fight's not over. There's a lot of time left on the clock, absolutely, and the more time there is, the harder it is to kill a bill. But there's more ways to kill a bill than the past one. So stay involved, stay agitated, and let's hopefully do something good for people of Texas for once.
Thank you, Allison.
I have very little new to add to this conversation. I just want to share, I hope this doesn't come across as controversial, but in our legislative priorities, we actually didn't talk about vouchers at all. We just talked about appropriately funding public education, and I just have the mindset, I don't have a problem with competition, but in order to compete, we have to make sure that the people who take care of kids are appropriately compensated. We have to ensure that we have the appropriate funding to expand career and technical education programs, to fully fund special education, and at that point, I believe that parents will choose that, or clearly see that the public schools in our communities are doing a great job educating the children of our future.
So I just wanted to say that, in the governor's state of the state, he really knows how to frame things, because he talked about teacher pay raises. But the thing is, he wants to do it through a teacher incentive allotment. And my sister-in-law is a teacher, so I reached out to her and said, what do you think about that? Well, the thing is, the teacher incentive allotment, and the governor will say, oh, teachers have the ability to make 6-figure salaries through this teacher incentive allotment. But the deal is, 5 teachers can do that out of the, it's just it's a proportion. It's a very small percentage, because not every school district participates. There's a lot of hurdles to go through to join the program. But in addition to that, you have to, as a teacher, show progress in your student achievement. So that might work for a math teacher where he can show that your student has progressed, or an English teacher. But my sister-in-law who teaches forensic science, that doesn't work. So she wouldn't even have the opportunity to get that incentive. And so in addition to that, she said what it does is it creates a motive to cheat. And I don't know if y'all heard in the news recently, but there was some sort of a cheating scandal that happened. I can't remember where in the state. But, you know, really what we should be doing is making sure our teachers are paid like the professionals that they are. One thing that we haven't talked about, and most people will ask, and it could be one of the questions that we get, is what can we do? And that's so important because besides coming and hearing all of us talk, what you can do is vital because you have the ability to sway what happens in the legislature. I know a lot of people feel like, oh, they won't listen. Well, they won't listen if you don't talk to us. We won't listen if you don't talk to us. So I will give an example. First day of session, busloads of people were brought to the Capitol. And as I walked through the hallways, I was like, wow, what is going on today? Everybody had t-shirts on. They said, ban Democratic chairs. Actually, they said ban Democrat chairs because they keep saying it improperly, whatever. But just the fact that there were so many people, that makes an impression. Same thing, when our office gets barraged by phone calls, when we get barraged by emails, when we get a lot of postcards or letters, it gets our attention. So what you can do is come to the Capitol. If you can't come to the Capitol, then you can use whatever form of communication is available to you or is comfortable for you. But the more people that come to the Capitol, the more the representatives are going to know they care about this issue. And I'll give one other story. I was at an event, it was with insurance agents. The people I was around, for the most part, are not politically tuned in. And so I'm having this conversation with a woman who lives in Jonestown, and I always ask people, who is your representative? I'm a state representative. And she said, and they usually say, I don't know. And so I said, well, Jonestown, that used to be in my district, but it is no longer. Your representative is Ellen Troxclair. And she says, oh yeah, that's great. And I said, well, did you know, you just told me your daughter is a teacher and you care passionately about our public schools and you're not for vouchers. Did you know that Representative Troxclair is for vouchers and voted for them each time last session? And she gave this startled look like, really? She had no idea. I mean, number one, she had no idea who her representative was, even though she voted for her. And because she, voted. And number two, she didn't know how her representative had voted. So I say this to say, all of us know people around us who don't want to pay attention to politics. They find it too divisive. They have seen pictures of their representative and that their representative looks very nice. And their representative comes across very nice. And unless pushed hard, their representative will probably say what they want to hear. But when people know the records of their representative, that might impact what they do and how they vote.
Thank you. Okay, so now we can get to some of these nifty audience questions. And I saw a few of them kind of saying the same thing here, which, what if you as a parent apply for a voucher, if we have vouchers? How would this play out? And then you decide not to send your kids to private school, or you send the child to private school and then take him out, him or her out, and put in a public school. What happens then? Any idea?
I don't know the first.
I mean, we don't have a law, so what would be?
Yeah, we don't have a law yet, so we don't exactly know what's gonna be tied to this, but I do know that, same thing with charter schools. When your child goes to a different school and they get that funding, they get that funding. And so if a charter school or a private school kicks your kid out, then they still got your funding. And now if he goes back to a public school who does not have the funding that is associated with that, right? Now, it's a little more complicated than that. but in a nutshell, that's fundamentally it. And I think it's really important for people to understand that they can keep your money. The public schools right now are already dealing with a lot of kids who leave charter schools, who do not bring that money with them to the public schools. It is already an issue. So I think it's gonna be worse with this for sure. And there was something, Representative Goodwin said, and again, I apologize for taking up so much time, but when you advocate, when you go down there and talk to them, I do encourage you to do that. Join a group. There are groups out there, there's so many groups. This is such a great group. Join the grandparents. They have people who are spending a lot of time understanding these issues. And I can tell you as somebody who also runs a group, it is a lot of work to understand what's going on, and it's almost impossible to do it alone. So don't try to change the world on your own, y'all. Join a group, find an organization who's already doing this. Find an organization, like for example, I'm with the ACPTA. Any PTA member can join us. Any community member can join a PTA. Find a school in your community, join their PTA, it costs like 10 or 12 bucks. Totally worth it, gives you access to all of the resources, the Texas PTA, National PTA, we do federal legislative priority advocacy as well. But the reason why I say that is because it is, again, I'll talk about community. Join with people, share your knowledge, share your passion, share your joy, approach with advocacy with love in your heart and a partnership perspective. Because they are attacked all day long. These poor representatives are in there like making deals with the devil. They're looking them in the eyeballs, right? And they don't need to be harassed all the time. And the guys who are making the bad decisions, they also will turn away from you very quickly. They want to know that you understand the issues. They want to know that you are there as an ally, even if you don't agree with anything they say. Please. We had this wonderful training yesterday. Relentlessly decent, y'all. Relentlessly decent because the other side is not. Relentlessly honest, y'all, because the other side is not. And then relentlessly share because the other side is. Relentlessly engage because the other side is. Relentless, y'all. Relentless. Join a crew. Join a group. There are relentless organizations out there. Grandparents are one of them. Raise Your Hand Texas. Wonderful place to find out more information about vouchers. My own team, we send out every Monday, we call it Make It Matter Monday. We send out an email that tells people what to do, what to think about, what information to absorb for the week, so that they're ready, that everybody's kind of on the same page, and we're all sharing very specific messages, kindly with the representatives who are policymakers.
Thank you very much. So, this is kind of what I think of as an elephant in the room question, which is, we've heard lots of good information about vouchers. Seems pretty unarguable to me, a lot of the points about budgets, about choice, and so on. So, bearing that in mind, vouchers have been swirling around Texas since I think 1995. 57, okay. So, more recently, why then, with all these negative things about vouchers, why does the governor and a lot of folks in our legislature keep pushing?
Thank you.
Why?
Right, I hear y'all have the answer. Money. There's Jeff Gass, there's Tim Dunn, there's Ferris Wilkes who have poured millions of dollars into this issue. So they want to spread their schools. Their schools are based on Christianity, but it's based on a different kind of Christianity, Christian nationalism. And they believe in these pillars of Christians running schools, business, government, etc. And really it's not just regular old Christianity. It's a belief that's it's not what most of us Christians believe. And I truly believe that is the ultimate motive. It's a power thing. You know, if this is you know, what other reason? Because the vast majority of people do support their public schools. The vast majority of people send their kids to public schools. What other reason could there be for wanting to divert money out of our public schools and starve them? I just don't know, other than there are a few people in this world that want to influence and maintain power. And they do that with money.
Thank you. There are a lot of control freaks in this world. Dr. Pavel, I have one for you, a little clarity on what is the difference between attendance-based funding and enrollment-based funding?
Sure. Texas is one of 6 states in the country that fund schools based on attendance. So in Georgetown, 1% attendance more is literally $1 million. So in most school districts in the Austin area, about the average attendance right now is around 95%. So the hard part here is we don't staff schools based upon 95% attendance. We assume everyone's going to show up, right? So if I have Carver Elementary School and they have 700 elementary kids, well, then I make sure there's enough teachers to teach 700 elementary kids. We don't staff the schools assuming, well, only 95% of them are going to show up on a given day. And so since we have to budget as if everyone's going to show up, the problem is the funding only equates to the average percent that showed up over the course of the year. So there's a big gap between what we have to spend to fulfill the needs of all students and what we actually get from the state in terms of funding.
Thank you very much. So Robert Norris, GPS is getting a lot of attention today, and someone asked, does one need to be an actual grandparent?
Well, whoever asked that question, thank you. We're actually nowadays calling ourselves grandparents and grandfriends. We just want as many friends. By the way, everybody here is either a grandparent or a grandfriend right now. You are a grandfriend. That's right. Daphne's son, he's a grandfriend.
Absolutely, his friend.
That's right.
All right, so all are welcome.
Yeah, all are welcome. We have people who are under 30. We have people that are over 75, and we love them all. Join us one more time, grandparentsforpublicschools.org.
I think my wife joined actually.
And grandparents have a lot more free time than parents do, by the way. This is an important factor in their success.
Thank you. Thank both of you. Okay, so with federal funding for schools perhaps in jeopardy now, nationally, would Texas lose even more funding for its public schools? Sound right.
So we took a look at it, and the federal government last year, I think, provided about 18% of funding. If the Department of Education goes away, that they often fund special education services and food. So yes, that would leave a big gap for us to fill at the state level. So that is very, very concerning.
Did you have anything to add?
I think the other thing to think about there is, because there's been some talk of, oh, if the Department of Education goes away, they'll just give the money to the states. Well, great, what is the state gonna spend it on, right? Are we gonna spend it on border security? Are we gonna spend it on, insert political red meat either here, or would it go back to our schools, or would they just be further underfunded? I think the most important thing to remember there is recapture, which is designed to help increase equity, is already used at times as a bit of a slush fund, where funds that are supposed to be pulled from property-rich districts to go to property-poor districts are already being diverted. So if we're already seeing diversion of funds, just giving more money in bonk to the state to spend on education is no guarantee those funds will ever be spent on education.
Great, thanks a lot. Okay, so do teachers in private schools, would private teachers, or do private school teachers need to have certification as do their public school brethren?
No, that's entirely up to the private school. They don't have to be certified.
And it's not part of the current program.
So who can claim a voucher? Parent, foster parent? I guess any foster parent, right?
Yeah, I would assume the guardian would claim it.
And those would also be good for charter schools, is that, do they count as private schools?
No, charter schools are public schools right now. Right now, kids can go to charter schools, but kind of similar to the private school situation, it's up to the charter school to accept them.
Thank you. Some of these are hard. Okay, so the question is, what are the reasons why the Senate rejected an amendment asking for budget transparency for private schools?
Well, the Senate is ruled by Dan Patrick, so it comes back to, why did Dan Patrick not like that amendment? And I have no idea.
Okay.
Call him up and ask him, y'all. Yeah.
Question is, how would visually impaired students or hearing impaired students be handled?
I mean, I think, Austin actually has an excellent school for the deaf. I think also for the blind. I don't know private schools that do that, so I don't know that really, from what I understand, the public schools that we have right now are excellent. I don't know why parents would want to, I don't know if they could find a private school.
Thank you. So, do we have information on the amount of stolen recapture taxes that didn't get used for property for ISDs?
So my staff has collected some data from TEA. It's not very easy to get, and so we've been trying to, we put together a one-pager on school funding to show the amount that was budgeted, the amount that was spent, and the amount that was not spent, so that we could see it's billions of dollars that were intended to be for schools that was not spent. And so, we have asked for clarity, and the TEA will say, well, it could be spent on any number of things, school-related, usually.
How much money would go to for-profit vendors in the proposed legislation?
It was tens of millions of dollars, I believe, but again, it depends on the particular bill. I think each bill was a little bit different. I had heard something like 5 or 8 or 10% of the full amount would go towards, I think, TEA would get a certain percentage and the vendors would get a certain percentage.
Thank you. So, we touched on this a little bit in setting the stage. Daphne, in your view, is academic performance improving in Texas schools?
Well, okay. Yes, absolutely. I think our teachers are doing an excellent job, and I think that we have, as a student population, experienced some really big challenges that we are overcoming. Some schools are doing better. It's really hard to tell, honestly, because we're using the STAR as a measure of this, and the STAR measures poverty. It's a political tool, not an educational one. So, I would say that the data is incomplete because of what it's based on, but absolutely our teachers are killing it. When you go into a public school, anytime, you're going to see teachers who are, working with these kids who have fallen behind in reading. And by the way, it's not just the pandemic. We shrunk up poverty in this state in a way that is really devastating to our schools. And I think that it's super important that we're aware of that we do not, our teachers are having to solve like society level problems every single day in our schools. And so yes, I would say our schools are doing an excellent job. I would say ignore STAR data because that doesn't tell you what our schools are doing to help the mental health issues of our kids. It doesn't talk about the arts and those other programs that are so vital to many of our kids. But I think, I don't know how to answer that exactly other than, because the data is so messed up, other than absolutely. Our kids, in fact, it's kind of funny, people talk about our kids, they talk about our schools. When I was growing up, I was a kid in the 60s and 70s, graduated in the 80s. It was the height of education if you could recite all of the capitals of every state. Right? This was what you're considered an educated person. Nowadays, our kids are like talking about quantum mechanics. They're understanding issues that were never even part of my education. And so the idea that our kids are falling behind is not true. Our kids are extraordinary. And if you get a chance to talk to any of them, please do. Because they're amazing and they're learning things. They have a kindness, they have an emotional maturity that is being taught through SEL programs that does not exist in some areas that are not being taught as the algorithm, that doesn't exist universally in our parent population. So our kids are amazing.
Thank you, sir. So, the last question we have, you've gotten a lot of people fired up, I think, because it's all about related to what we've talked about a little. What can we do about it? Underfunding and vouchers, what can we do about it? That's the question. As you.
I will repeat, come to the Capitol, reach out to your representative. I always say, reach out not just to your representative, but also to your senator, also to your lieutenant governor, and also to your governor. While we can be a little skeptical that they might respond to us, the more they hear from us, the better.
I just want to express my gratitude, our gratitude for all of you being here on a Sunday afternoon. Thank you for keeping the conversation going. Thank you to talking to your friends and neighbors about this. And thank you for reaching out to your elected representatives to keep the conversation going and really let them know how Texans feel about funding for public education.
Yeah, I think, not to belabor the point, when it comes to advocacy, it's really three things. It's, lead with your personal story, because that's the only thing you have, back up with data. Follow up, so if you, in the course of the meeting, are gonna get some more information, make sure you do that. And then send, follow up that, thanks for your time, let's keep talking this issue. And I think, always be a reliable source of information. I think, as we touched on before, be, persistent but respectful, that's always a good fast role. Yeah, I mean, I think, it's regardless of how this legislative session goes for our public schools, the challenge of public school funding is not gonna go away. So stay involved, don't be discouraged, don't be dissuaded, be persistent, be relentless, until we have the schools our children deserve.
Okay, all of it, and I've been saying it all, this whole time, because I'm not very good at following instructions, but, join with groups, y'all. There are people out there saying, this guy's badass, join that, join those groups. Super important. I do think there's good energy. I do appreciate all of you guys coming here today. How many of you, raise your hand, are you ready to engage? Let's see it. So engaging means calling your representatives. It means making phone calls and being relentless about it. Again, say it after me, relentlessly decent. Relentlessly honest. And relentless. Share that message with everybody you know. We are the cavalry. There's nobody else coming to save us. We are the ones who need to understand this issue. We are the ones who need to make our voices heard, and we are the ones who are going to solve this problem. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Robert?
Yeah, one more thing. So, grandparents from public schools, we have been growing like you would not believe. We started off from 0 in August 2023. We're over 800 now. And why? Because a lot of grandparents, a lot of seniors are thinking, well, what can I do? I don't know what to do. Well, we're here. We're grandparents from public schools. We can be your voice. We are doing postcard writing like you would not believe. We're going to be calling reps. We're going to be going to the Capitol. Matter of fact, I'm going down there tomorrow morning because the Senate Finance Committee is hearing the budget for TEA. That's going to be the first chance that people have to testify and say, we want better state funding for public schools. 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, Senate Finance Room. I'll be there.
All right.
But you don't have to. You can write postcards.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, can I have another round of applause for our terrific panel? Thank you all. And so we have some events are coming up related to vouchers and education in general. There are sheets in the back. If you can't capture all this information with the QR codes, please grab one at the voter registration desk. So we've got February 22, Save Texas Schools Rally at the Capitol. There's a statewide, it should say statewide, it says stateside. We'll all be stateside, don't worry. PTA rally on February 24th. And then Pastors for Texas Children will have advocacy training and visits to legislatures on March 4th, March 17th. We're going to have Texas AFT Educators Legislative Advocacy. So check that all out. There's other things going on too, but that's what we know about now. So I told you, I think I said we'd get you all out of here before kickoff time, and we're doing that thanks to our efficient panelists. Thanks for attending this forum. I hope you got a takeaway. If you want to join Indivisible 1431, there's the email, or just elbow me in the corridor. So anyway, yeah, watch the puppy. Have a good, safe trip wherever you're going. Enjoy your evening. Thank you. Goodbye.